Our time at Wat Pho was wonderful, more than I expected, really. In spite of everything I was carrying, I managed to enjoy it. As I slowly wandered around, I found a quiet corner tucked away behind one of the smaller jetties, where an old Bodhi tree cast dappled shadows across a small courtyard. It was the kind of spot you stumble into rather than seek out, like it chose you as you wonder if it's okay to be there. I sat down beneath the broad branches, closed my eyes, and let the world fall away for a while. The stillness didn't solve anything. It didn't erase the devastating ache that flared whenever I thought about Charlie. But it did something else, something quieter. It let me sit with the pain without needing to embrace or fight it. There, beneath the descendant of the same kind of tree the Buddha had sat under, I felt a thin sliver of peace slide in. No grand epiphany, just the ability to hold the grief without it hardening into resentment or outrage at the cosmic unfairness of it all. Charlie was gone. The world kept turning. The bells kept chiming gently in the distance, while a soft breeze danced with the Bodhi leaves like a whispered reassurance. This, too, this is part of it all. If you ever find yourself in Bangkok, Wat Pho should be the first temple you visit. Don't overthink it. Just go. There's something about that Wat that gets under your skin in the best way. The grounds are stunning, elegant without being showy, expansive yet intimate, even with tourists drifting through, selfie sticks in hand, oblivious to everything outside their viewfinder. The place holds its tranquility without trying. You feel it in your bones, like the temple is gently breathing all around you and you are part of that breath. Wat Pho has one foot planted deep in the ancient world, and the other stepping calmly into the present. It doesn't need to impress you. It just is. And that is a most impressive thing. From Wat Pho, we headed to the Bangkok National Museum, just across from Tong Sanam Luang. It feels a bit like scholarly perfection and sprawl, like someone opened up the attic of that 4,000-year-old civilization. It's the kind of museum that rewards the slow walker and the curious mind. I love museums. The younger edition of me didn't because my mom would drag my sister and me through every museum within a 100-mile radius, no matter where we were. At the time, I was more interested in the gift shops and escape routes. But in hindsight, those long, slow walks past ancient artifacts, galleries full of the master's brush strokes, marble masterpieces, and faded dioramas were priceless. I wouldn't have half the curiosity or perspective I value now without those experiences and memories. The Bangkok National Museum is a place that rewards that kind of long view appreciation. Much like the Smithsonian, it's not a single institution, but a sprawling encyclopedic collection of collections. Housed in what was once the Wang Na Palace grounds, it charts the story of Thailand from the earliest Sukhothai kingdoms through the Ayutthaya dynasty, the rise of Bangkok, and into the modern era. It's too much to absorb in one visit. Or 10. Or more. Still, even a cursory walkthrough is enough to flood the imagination with wonder. Ancient stone Buddhas, royal war and funeral chariots, shadow puppets, calligraphy masters' work, and weaponry, all whispering fragments of a much larger tale. It's overwhelming in the best way. A place that invites you to keep coming back, to listen deeply to the stories of an entire people. We took our time drifting from gallery to gallery, building to building, trying to take in the sheer scope of it all. It felt like a living archive of Thailand's soul, layered, intricate, and deeply human. We toured slowly, out of quiet respect, without a plan, as each hall and room offered something unexpected and deeply moving. Once we'd overdosed on historical eye candy, gilded Buddhas, ancient scrolls, and enough ceremonial weaponry to start a new dynasty, we flagged down a tuk-tuk and bounced our way toward Chinatown. Malaya was on a mission to find red lanterns for the Lunar New Year back home, and even though I'd already spent a fair amount of time there, decided to go along for the ride to watch her take in the excesses of Chinatown. Also, because I suspected she might need someone to carry things. Did I want to go back to the hotel and curl up in a ball? Yes. As I've already written, Bangkok's Chinatown is not so much a neighborhood as a full contact sports sensory experience on a grand scale. We wandered through the maze of alleys that seemed to fold in on themselves. Lanterns strung overhead like constellations, the scent of roast duck and two-stroke blue smoke in the air, while shopkeepers barked out prices with the urgency of auctioneers. Every turn offered some new marvel or mystery. It was, as always, chaos with character. We found a noodle joint wedged deep inside one of Chinatown's endless food alleys, the kind of place with low-worn benches and rickety tables, fluorescent lighting, and ineffective fans that swiveled just enough to remind you how hot you still were. There was no English menu, just photos, age faded into abstraction under plastic, and a server who sized us up, decided we were harmless, and took our orders the second we pointed at anything. The noodles were perfect, springy, rich with pork broth, topped with a medium boiled egg that collapsed at the touch of a chopstick. We shared a plate of dumplings that arrived suspiciously fast, and some golden fried spring rolls that made up in crunch what they lacked in mastery. It wasn't elegant, but it was honest. The kind of meal that resets your brain and reminds you why dive food beats five-star dining 9 times out of 10. Plus, their roasted chili oil was incredible. Back on Ko Chang, I had realized I needed to deal with the slow creep of stuff I'd accumulated through my travels. Books from the monastery, more from the lost bookstore in Chiang Mai that hadn't been left behind somewhere, plus more than a few garments I hadn't worn since the humidity made cotton a liability. Malaya, blessed with executive airline status and extra baggage allowance, offered to mule a load home for me. All I had to do was find a bag that didn't scream "Emergency Laundry Day." I didn't haggle. The prices were more than reasonable. I settled on a heavy-duty expandable nylon bag with a handle and wheels that seemed trustworthy. One book I treasure above all others that needed to get home safely was a gift from the monks at I Monastery. It's called the Pali English Chanting Book, a handbook of Buddhist chants, translated from Pali, Sanskrit, and Thai. Now, there's a riveting title for you, huh? It's big, it's heavy, it smells faintly of incense and jungle mold. No, it's not topping any bestseller list. The NYT doesn't even know it exists, nor will you find it stacked in airport bookstores next to the novelties or celebrity memoirs. But for me, it's sacred, a living relic, a reminder of the time I spent in the mountains with those extraordinary monks, my brothers, my teachers, my friends, in meditation, education, chores, and meals. Mosquito warfare aside, my monastery and the lessons I took from those amazing men needed a memento, and this was a beautiful piece that was perfect in every way. It's a reminder that I was there, that I had sat, I had listened, I had learned, I tried. That I mattered to them enough for them to give me this before I left. And in my world, that's bestseller material. We kept wandering through Chinatown, slowly angling toward Rama 4 Road in pursuit of both crispy-skinned duck and some perfect red lanterns. Not elusive in terms of quantity, lanterns were everywhere, hanging from wires, storefronts, and street carts. But Malaya was holding out for a specific kind of lantern magic. Right size, right shape, right shop. We strolled by stall after stall, store after store, each display louder than the last. Rows of lanterns, the riot of red so intense it was psychedelic. Finally, just when I thought she might give up, she stopped. One shop along the boulevard had a range of sizes that fit the bill. Inside was a riot of color and form. Paper, silk, glass, tassels, lucky charms and amulets, and every shade of red known to humankind. But what caught me wasn't the lanterns. Sitting on a low stool at a wooden table sat a fellow, bent slightly forward, his hands gliding over long gold sashes. He moved with practiced calm, dipping a fat brush into a bowl of red ink and sweeping out calligraphy so fluid, so impossibly elegant, I nearly forgot to breathe. I asked, awkwardly, with gestures and respect, if I could stay and observe. After a round of translation and some quiet smiles, he nodded. I stood there for 15 minutes, maybe more, watching him create something I couldn't read but could still feel. Malaya, lanterns in hand, collapsed flat like obedient little origami soldiers, had drifted behind, pulled into the orbit of storefronts. She browsed as I wandered ahead in slow motion, up the sidewalk as the city bustled around me. My personal fog bank was back. I had been trying to enjoy everything around me, but the brave face I had worn was cracking. It was a hot, thick, and sticky Bangkok afternoon. Chinatown was humming like it always does, bikes and scooters darting between cars and through impossibly narrow alleys packed with people, as hawkers called out their daily wares, the scent of grilled meats and hot fry oil hanging heavy in the air. I found a stretch of railing along the roadside to lean against, a bit of shade and stillness in the crazy, while Malaya did her thing. She'd catch up. It was during that break that I witnessed something that made me stop in my tracks and think deeply about culture, about humanity, about who we really are as a species. I was leaning on a metal barricade on the edge of Rama 4 Road, the kind that meant to keep pedestrians alive and scooters mostly in their lane. It was one of those small pauses that feels bigger than it is. Just me, the heat radiating off the concrete, and the low hum of a city that never fully powers down. I looked at the ever-entertaining traffic slalom by, tuk-tuks, taxis, buses and trucks, and scooters stacked with improbable cargo. Bangkok's constant mechanical parade. I reached out to Charlie in the quiet way I had started to do. Just a simple hello. I told her I missed her. No grand gestures, no skyward speeches. Just standing there, taking it all in, and letting the moment hold us both for a beat. Beside me sat an older Thai woman, perched on a short blue plastic stool, the kind you see stacked alongside restaurants or tucked around noodle carts. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, a why and a heartfelt sawat di krab and ka, a smile, a nod, a shared moment of quiet amid the thrum together from different worlds on a random curb in Chinatown. We watched the world go by and occasionally point something out to each other. A street vendor with an overstuffed cart, a tourist struggling with a map, a tuk-tuk badly in need of a tune-up, smoke belching behind it like a rooster tail, and chuckle, inviting the other into our observations. Her English was stripped-down basic, but her Sabai was fluent and infectious. We shared a kind of unspoken friendship born of mutual amusement in the same place. Then she gasped and grabbed my hand. Her Thai was rapid and her other hand pointing even faster. I had no idea what she was saying. Across the boulevard, 6 lanes wide, which in Thailand translates to 10, a living river of motion and madness, an elderly man had collapsed at a bus stop, his body crumpled awkwardly, slumped half on and half off the bench, his head and shoulder twisted at an unnatural, awful angle. And then, without hesitation, people around him moved. Not away, but to him. At least 10 strangers rushed in. No one looked around. No one pulled out a phone. No one waited for someone else to take the lead. They just moved, as if called by the same silent bell. A few crouched in front of him, steadying his body, gently lifting him upright like he was something breakable. One held an umbrella above his head to shield him from the punishing sun. Another began fanning him with a folded newspaper. Someone else brushed the dust from his shirt with the kind of tenderness you might reserve for a father or a friend or someone you love. They were standing in traffic, Bangkok traffic. But the city, usually relentless, loud, kinetic, somehow softened around them. The river of engines and exhaust curled away, as if it, too, understood this moment was not to be interrupted. I ran across the alley to the corner shop, grabbed 2 bottles of cold water, and then crossed that arterial chaos one lane at a time, holding up my hand like I was Moses on a crosswalk. My heart was pounding like a war drum, but I felt pulled, tethered to something larger than adrenaline or fear. When I reached the circle of care surrounding the man, I tried to hand a bottle to a guy who had taken charge in the quiet way that real leaders do. He looked up, met my eyes, and said gently but firmly, "No, no water. Ambulance coming. Bad for heat collapse." I didn't know that. And just like that, I was no longer needed. I stood there for a moment, unsure, watching the man on the bench slowly come back into himself. People crouched beside him, smiling, reassuring, holding presents like it was sacred. Then I turned and crossed back to the other side. And as I stood by the railing again, hand still clutching the unopened bottles, I realized I was crying. Quietly, unexpectedly. Because I had just witnessed a moment of pure humanity, unvarnished and holy, in the middle of Bangkok traffic. No one had asked, "What's in it for me?" No one hesitated. No one walked away or doubted what to do. In a world that often feels atomized and armored, each of us scrolling, rushing, isolating behind invisible walls, this was something older, deeper, a flicker of the ancient truth that we're not separate, that beneath the noise and the posturing, we know each other. 10 strangers heard the same silent signal and answered without speaking. They just moved, as if remembering, all at once, that we belong to each other. There was no spotlight, no hero, just a brief, blinding reminder that compassion isn't taught. It's remembered. That there's a current running through us, beneath identity, language, and nation, and sometimes it surges to the surface, unbidden. That's what culture really is, the collective shape of our instincts when no one's watching. That's what hope is, too. The idea that no matter how far apart we drift, the signal still gets through. There is goodness. There is love. It's not always loud, and it's rarely perfect, but it's there. And when we stop long enough, when we see each other clearly, we remember what and who we are. Very early the next morning, Malaya headed to the airport for her long journey home, her red lanterns packed flat, colorful companions to her luggage. I shifted gears and locations, moving into the Asoke residence apartments at the end of Sukhumvit 21 Road, which, truth be told, was way more of an alley than road. It's a solid, no-nonsense spot within easy strolling distance over the Asak Montree Road bridge to the Asak Pier along Klong San Sep. There, Klong ferries whisk you up and down to other neighborhoods, and it was just a couple blocks from the Phetchaburi BTS station. A practical choice. Central, quiet enough, with good bones and easy access to the veins of the city. While the apartment was older, it was a welcome change from the top-notch yet sterile bubble of the Marriott. Less polished, more lived in, more Thai. My new place had the kind of character that only comes with age. Wide rooms with tiled floors, worn but clean. A large, well-appointed bathroom with fixtures that worked just fine, and closets and drawers that promised permanence. Or at least the illusion of it. At the end of the alley sat a 7-Eleven, predictably open at all hours, and every afternoon the sidewalks and alley entrance came alive with street vendors hawking grilled, skewered sausages, sliced and iced fruit, and steaming bags of noodles and soups. The neighborhood had all the essential comforts, wrapped in a now familiar Bangkok mix. But then the door closed. Now alone, I unpacked without ceremony, without excitement for adventures to come. I hung pants and t-shirts up, unfolded tees and shorts into drawers with a sort of dull efficiency, as if completing a task would hold off the silence. I set up the bathroom. I opened my notebook. I put my pen to paper. The pages stared back, blank but not unkind, like a friend who doesn't know what to say. I tried again, but the words wouldn't come. My hands were still. Then everything rushed in. With the distractions gone, no monks, no tourists, no planning ludicrous routes on public transportation, no errands or temples or jokes to share, the weight I'd kept at bay came crashing in like a gigantic wave I'd foolishly thought I'd outrun. It flattened me. I didn't eat. I didn't go out. I lay there in the quiet hum of the AC, feeling myself disappear. The solitude was cavernous. I wasn't just lonely, I was unraveling. My heart ached for Charlie, for the serene rhythm of chants, saffron robes, and someone holy to hold on to. I needed a Wat. I needed monks with calm voices and kind eyes. I needed Buddha's silence to be louder than mine. I searched maps online, desperately. But for the first time since setting my feet down in Thailand, there wasn't a temple within immediate walking distance. Not even a small neighborhood shrine tucked behind a house or hidden under a Bodhi tree. Just concrete, traffic, and alleys that lit no spark to my imagination. And then the silence changed. It became a crushing presence, a heavy, unyielding thing compressing me from all sides. My world grew smaller, my chest tighter. And when the sun went down that night, I begged it to take me with it as I cried myself to sleep. Fitful sleep? No, not even close. It was more like a series of short, fractured naps, each one hijacked by my monkey, swinging in circles, banging cymbals, shrieking reminders of everything I didn't want to think about. I tossed, I turned, I cursed the ceiling, I cursed the silence, I cursed myself. I screamed at the universe for its insolence and audacity to say that I, like Icarus, had flown too high and was now paying the price. Dylan muttered somewhere in the background that it was all just a simple twist of fate. I tried to meditate. There was nothing there. Whatever inner tools I'd honed up at my monastery and on cushions and wats had gone AWOL, leaving me to white-knuckle my grief alone. By the time the sun rose, I was ragged, eyes dry, lips cracked, dehydrated, disoriented, and emotionally threadbare. I was desperate for water, but didn't give a shit. I took 2 melatonin with a stingy sip and waited for unconsciousness to do what mindfulness could not: smack my monkey into silence. When I came to, it was 7 p.m. The timer had turned off the AC and the room was thick with heat. My mouth was cotton. I could barely swallow. Hell, I could barely breathe. I lay there, half lucid, until I finally had a not-so-friendly come-to-Buddha with myself, some primal, exhausted internal boot camp sergeant dragging me upright. I stumbled into the open shower stall, turned the tap full blast, and collapsed on the cool stone floor, curling into a ball under the stream. For half an hour I lay there, not washing so much as hoping to dissolve. Just let the shower carry me down the drain like so much wasted potential. Eventually, hunger crawled in. Not real starvation, but the kind that makes your stomach yawn wide enough to consider chewing off a limb. Problem was, I had no hosen, no prick nam som, no noodles, no appetite for anything. Just emptiness. Reluctantly, I pulled on clothes and slipped out. At the end of the alley, the streetcars were doing their usual dance, but the fruit repulsed me. My throat clenched the moment I saw it. A single mangosteen brought Charlie crashing back. Her face, her eyes, her hands, the sweet way she offered me that first one. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't look. Instead, I went into the 7-Eleven and bought a fifth of Sang-Som rum. Again. Outside, I loaded up with 3 kinds of grilled sausages, a tofu pad thai, and some nameless soup that was either divine or garbage. I didn't care. The next morning, I woke up on the floor, hungover, sore. At least I dragged a pillow down with me. The bottle wasn't empty, but close enough. 2 water bottles sat empty beside me, evidence that at some point my better judgment made a brief cameo. Was I better? No, but I was no longer willingly sinking. I dragged myself to the shower, sat cross-legged on the wet stone floor, and let the steam permeate, and started to breathe. Slowly, deeply. Not forcing anything, letting the pain be there, but not win. And then, for the first time in days, I felt something shift. The tiniest opening, the beginning of letting go. I slipped into meditation, not gracefully, but honestly. I breathed through the sharp, edged ache. I saw the impermanence of it all. I forgave myself just enough to stay alive. My monkey slunk back to his cage, and I kept him there twiddling his thumbs in boredom. And I stayed there, in the steam, in the stillness, having a long overdue conversation with the one person I couldn't escape. Anicca. That's the Pali word for impermanence, one of the core tenets of Buddhism. But really it shows up in every tradition, east or west. As George Harrison sang, all things must pass. Or, to put it a little more bluntly, that shit ain't never gonna stay the same. It just doesn't. That's at the very heart of dukkha, suffering. That tension is the result of holding on when everything else is slipping through your fingers. And so it was that I cleared my head to some degree. I reached out and reminded Charlie I loved her, again, and started to piece myself back together, just enough to walk out the door and not fantasize about a jet falling from the sky to crush me into sweet, painless oblivion. The cracks were still there, but they were taped together for now. Whether Elmer's or Gorilla, time would tell. I had no illusions that I wouldn't get tumbled and dashed upon more jagged rocks as waves of grief slammed into me. But today I could breathe again. It's hard being someone who loves, feels, and empathizes so deeply, and there are many times that I've envied those who skate through their lives feeling nothing more than a mild endorphin buzz from attraction and commitment, who've never been caught in the undertow, never wrecked by the tidal wave. But that's not me. I feel it all. Deeply. I always have. And it's been my ruin on more than several occasions. But today, it was time to move forward and leave the past where it belonged. I found the hotel gym and beat the hell out of myself for 2 hours. I focused on every pedal stroke, every rep, every endless climb on the elliptical. Each breath was a small exorcism, forcing my body to sweat out the last of that bottle. A quick outdoor shower and a cannonball into the empty pool snapped me back to life. I felt alive enough, at least, to start making decisions again. For myself. And sadly, for only myself. Another wave of grief hit me with that realization. I didn't fight it. I leaned into it, let it roll over me. I even thanked it, quietly, for letting me see her again, just for a moment. And like the snap of a finger, that wave rolled on by. But this time, it left me standing. Dressed and finally in control of at least some of my mental faculties, it was time to go out and eat something substantial. get some strength back. I was craving Indian. That cuisine always manages to put a smile on my face. The bold, unapologetic flavors and spices that know who they are. But I wasn't in the mood for the overly simplified, same fare that so many places churn out. I wanted something off the beaten path, the kind of place where the locals eat, Thai and Indian alike. If no Farang had ever set foot inside, even better. I chatted with the young guys working at the front desk at the Asake residence apartments. Always cheerful and always eager to help. I told them about my quest. Without hesitation, one of them lit up. "Bombay masala," he said. "About 15 minutes down Sukhumvit 21, if you're on crutches. It's close and the best I've ever had, even including my mom's cooking." He was Indian, and I feared for his well-being if his mother ever heard that come out of his mouth. I mentioned this place earlier when describing high tea Peekaboo, but it deserves a deeper dive. Small, unassuming, and tucked near the end of that narrow alley, Bombay Masala was exactly the kind of place I'd hoped for. The big, open roll-up door created an open bay for food. I walked in and saw 8 tables. That was it. 3 had been pulled together and was occupied by a group of Indian guys playing backgammon between bites of food that smelled like home. If your home was somewhere between Delhi and a fantastic mango chutney perfumed dream. They greeted me with polite nods, as did the gentleman behind the counter. I took a seat and opened the menu. Sure, it was the usual greatest hits. Chicken tikka masala, sang paneer, garlic naan. But something told me the food would be better than average. Maybe it was the confidence of the backgammon players. Maybe it was the warm air, thick with cardamom, cumin, turmeric, ghee, and a subtle undercurrent of surprise that said, "What's a solo white guy doing here? I thought we were hidden away enough to dodge the tourists." There's something charismatic about the Indian lilt layered over English. It's one of those accents I've always found both musical and utterly charming. One of the guys at the front counter had that wonderful hybrid Indian cadence with an educated and Briton polish. It was as melodic as it was professional, and I could have listened to him read a grocery list and been completely content. We chatted while I placed my order. Tandoori chicken, mutton masala, hot, please, biryani rice, dal tadka, some plain naan, and, of course, a mango lassi, a drink I could never grow bored with. He wanted to know if I had stumbled into his restaurant or if it was online, or how did I discover this place? I told him about the guys at Asoke. He may have been a master poker-faced guy, but it really didn't seem to ring any bells. That gave me comfort, knowing the kid wasn't the guy's nephew or son shilling the place out of loyalty. Here's the thing. I'm someone who gets bored. Plain and simple. I get bored with complex things, and I get bored with simple things. It's one of the reasons I've changed careers a few times in my life. That restlessness? It doesn't discriminate. It crops up in my professional life though most predictably at the dinner table. Even when I've cooked something fantastic, plate-licking delicious, it rarely gets a second night of glory. Leftovers sit lonely and unloved on a back shelf while I crave something new, something different, something that surprises. It's also why I love to cook. Every dish is a new canvas, a new chance to not be bored. So when I say I could drink mango lassi every day and never get tired of it, that's saying something. It's creamy, tart, sweet, tropical, floral, like a hug and a vacation all at once. I suppose, in theory, I could grow tired of it. But in that moment, sitting in that tiny restaurant tucked away at the far end of an alley in Bangkok, surrounded by backgammon-playing locals and the scent of pan-toasted spices, it tasted like home and escape at the same time. I was sitting at a table waiting for the food to arrive, scrolling through Book O Face, the digital junk food monster, when one of the guys at the backgammon table asked if I would please join them. I smiled and told him I'd be honored, but only if they were willing to teach me a little backgammon. Now, full disclosure, that was cheating. Not cheating, but the kind of strategic undersell that would have made my old MIT graduate friend and backgammon mentor Mark beam with pride. See, I've been playing backgammon since high school, taught by a man who believed the doubling cube was a spiritual instrument and who never played a game without money on the line, even if it was just enough to buy a cup of coffee. I had lost many nickels, a few dimes, and way too many quarters before learning how to stop bleeding losses and start seeing the game like a math equation dressed up as a gentleman's pastime. Eventually, I got good. Good enough to beat almost anyone who didn't spend their Saturdays reading probability theory and dice roll odds for fun. There I was, humble bragging my way into a seat, acting like I wasn't about to sandbag the table. They welcomed me with warmth. I settled in, grateful not just for the game, but for the moment. Unexpected, spontaneous company. And just like that, I was no longer alone. At least, physically. They made room for me at their table without hesitation, shuffling chairs and clearing space with the easy grace of people who've known each other a long time, and are happy to fold a new soul into the mix. Someone poured me a glass of pungent, sweet mint tea, the kind that smells like memory and tastes like childhood if you were lucky enough to grow up in a household where someone simmered things slowly with care. They peppered me with questions between sips and chuckles. Where have you been? What are you doing in Bangkok? How did you end up here of all places? And as I told them the core of it, my monastic journey, my romantic disaster, my strange impulse to chase both silence and sensation, they listened with a kind of focused attention that caught me off guard. Not just polite curiosity, but something more. Genuine wonder, maybe. Or the rare moment when someone hears you without trying to fix you. One of the men, whose Sikh beard was magnificent enough to deserve its own wing in a museum, leaned in and asked me more about I Monastery. He'd been considering the program, he said, but kept finding reasons to delay. I shared all I could. The schedule, the calming hush of the jungle, the deep sacred peace of it, and the hellish beauty of confronting your own nonsense without distraction. His friends gave him the look of, "We've told you to do this, brother," and nodded their support. I told him he'd be more than welcome in our Sangha. He responded with a slow, seated bow and a warm, deliberate, "Dhanwad ji." I'd asked what it meant. Literally, it translates to, "Thank you, with respect, sir." But in spirit, it runs deeper. It's a phrase layered with humility, reverence, and a kind of quiet honor. A bow not just of body, but of heart. My food started to arrive. Dish by fragrant, glorious dish. The mutton masala, spiced to the flop sweat-inducing level I had begged for, smelled like everything I needed. It hit the table like an old friend. Bold, warm, unapologetically alive. I was already plotting how to build a tandoor back in the States, as if the flavors might follow me home and anchor something that felt lost. The staff set the dishes at my original table, but the guys waved me over with the urgency of co-conspirators. They'd already eaten. They said it was time to induct me into their sacred backgammon circle. I asked if money was involved, and that drew the kind of laughs that start low and rippled outward. "Of course," one of them said, grinning. "But don't worry. We won't let you lose too much. Just enough to earn your seat. And the next round of tea? That's on you." And just like that, surrounded by strangers who were rapidly becoming something else entirely, I felt it. Some small, defiant flicker of aliveness stirring beneath the grief. It didn't erase anything. It didn't fix the gaping hole where Charlie used to live. But it gave me a moment where I wasn't drowning. A moment where the world, in all its messy, spicy, laughing humanity, reached a hand into the dark and reminded me, "You're still here." "All right," I said. "Let's play. What could go wrong?" We laughed, really laughed, as our voices bounced off the alley walls and scattered into the night. Laughter like that doesn't just echo. It lifts. It stitches. It fills in the cracks, if only for a while. By my fourth straight win, their suspicion was thick enough to cut with a dull knife. My pile of 10 bot coins had grown impressively high. Silver trophies for a man playing the long con of pretending he didn't know what he was doing. Eventually, I came clean. I fessed up to years of practice, tournaments, late night games, and smoke filled rooms. I dropped the act and placed the coins back in their hands, trying to look appropriately contrite. To make amends, I ordered another pot of that glorious mint tea, steeped in sugar, forgiveness, and the kind of laughter that floats, light and golden, above the heaviest things we carry. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like closure. Sometimes it just looks like strangers, a board game, and a cup of tea strong enough to remind you that life, in all its stubborn beauty, goes on. The last I heard from Arvind, he decided to apply for the I Monastery program and was buzzing with excitement to dive into the calm and beautiful life of a monastic. The food? Amazing. Better than any other Indian meal I'd eaten in Thailand, let alone Bangkok, let alone anywhere else except in London all those years ago. My taste buds were still tingling from the bold spices and smoky tandoori when I tucked the leftovers into a few containers and started to wander back to the apartment to stash them in the fridge. By now, the city had settled into its nighttime flow. I walked back and was almost to the end when I noticed something I'd completely missed in the daylight because, let's face it, I was living in a fog and tunnel vision was my only means of keeping myself fed. A framed sign out along the side of the alley just 2 doors down from my lobby, and another sign mounted on a back wall, now glowing softly with green backlighting. WYWS cocktails. I had no clue as to what WYWS meant, but I sure as hell knew the other word. The building itself was tall and narrow, unassuming to the point of invisibility. Somehow, in my haze of basic survival, eat, sleep, tried to stay alive, though it wasn't a priority at the time, I'd completely overlooked it. I brought my food upstairs to the 5th floor first. Indian food is wonderfully aromatic, rich, inviting, and complex, but also potent, and I didn't want to risk offending the bar patrons by bringing that smell into a shared space. What kind of place was WYWS? A dingy dive? A hidden gem? A ganja den and cocktail bar hidden away to avoid detection? I had no idea, so better safe than sorry. I made my way back down and stepped into WIWS, and suddenly I was somewhere else entirely. Walking into WIWS, I boarded a Pullman dining car from the golden age of rail travel. You know the ones, luxurious, sleek, and meticulously crafted with rich detail and swank everywhere you looked. The Pullman Company revolutionized train travel in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, turning cramped, noisy carriages into rolling palaces on wheels. Their dine-in bar cars weren't just about function. They were theaters of elegance, with polished wood, rich paneling, plush leather seats, gleaming brass fixtures, and dimmed amber-hued lights designed to coax relaxation and conversation. WIWS embodied all that grandeur. Intimate seating areas lined with soft leather that whispered stories of clandestine meetings and midnight rendezvous. Walls slatted in dark, gleaming wood that tipped its hat to history. The lighting was warm and low, casting a golden haze over gleaming bottles and crystal glassware, like the place was preserving an era where cocktails were an art form and bartenders were alchemists. It wasn't just a bar, it was a time machine. A secret lounge that felt poised on the edge of some glorious cinematic scene. I could almost hear the faint echo of swing jazz drifting in from an invisible Victrola, and the soft clatter of the pill bouncing into its destination on a roulette wheel hidden away behind an Asian screen. Actually, the soundtrack was modern pop hip hop, but jazz really would have been more appropriate considering the stage setting. For a moment, I wasn't a weary, heartbroken traveler chomping on leftovers in a Bangkok apartment while laughing at the exaggerated emotive acting on a Thai soap opera plot twist. Was she pregnant with her ex boyfriend's evil twin's child or just faking a coma again? I was someone who had stepped into a hidden world, one where stories weren't streamed, they were sipped, where smoky cocktails birthed memory and myth, and the past and present folded into each other like a bartender folding citrus peel over a flame. I quickly abandoned my martini strategy. I mean, I love a perfect martini, but this wasn't the time or place for one. This bar was clearly a temple for the cocktail devout. A martini here would be like ordering plain toast at a patisserie in Paris. Technically acceptable, but deeply disrespectful. WYWS was not a dive bar. This place was a cocktail laboratory. The bar back was a shrine to craftsmanship. Rows of homemade bitters and tinctures and dropper bottles, vintage labels on obscure liquors, and enough high-end spirits to create anything and everything you might dream up. There was even a towering chrome citrus press that looked like it could juice a grapefruit and forge a horseshoe at the same time. And the bartenders, Ert and T, immaculate. Starched white shirts, black vests, neat bow ties. They moved with the calm, fluid choreography of men who had nothing to prove and everything to perfect. No juggling bottles or fire-breathing gimmicks here. Just quiet confidence, glancing precision, and the occasional nod of approval when a lemon twist, having just been flamed, landed just right. I watched them work, pulling oddities from lowboy coolers, adding a whisper of this, a vapor of that. Whatever these drinks were, they weren't just cocktails. They were compositions, liquid sonatas, beautiful concoctions in cool glasses. So, I did what any slightly cocky cocktail lover would do when presented with a master behind the bar. I ordered the hardest drink I knew. I'll have a Sazerac, but I'd like it with cognac instead of rye, I said casually, like I was down a gauntlet wrapped in an absinthe rinse. The Sazerac is no joke. It's the drink that demands you know what the hell you're doing. The original New Orleans cocktail. A balancing act of cognac, if you're going for the true original, sugar, Peychaud's and Angostura bitters, and just the right ghostly swirl of absinthe. Get one note wrong, and it's a wreck. Too sweet, and it's cough syrup. Too boozy, and you're chewing firewood. Skip the lemon twist, you're dead to me. If they flinched, I didn't see it. T, the bartender at my end, gave a single approving nod, like I'd passed some kind of test, then reached for the ingredients with the calm assurance of someone who'd been waiting for a Sazerac request all night. He didn't consult a book or ask his coworker anything. I thought this was going to be tough. T shrugged it off with that, "What else you got?" attitude that says, "Dude, I've made thousands of these." And it was perfect. A hidden gem cocktail bar 30 feet down from the lobby of my apartment? I knew where my nights would end while I stayed in this end of town. But that night, I really didn't need a repeat hangover command performance, so I did the one and done, warning T that I'd see them the next night. I woke early after a decent night's sleep, but good enough. What I needed was some temple time. I dug a little deeper into the map and came up with Wat Utthai Taram, a quiet spot about a mile and a half away, tucked off Kamphaeng Phet 7 Road. I decided to walk it, and I'm glad I did. As soon as I crossed over the Klong Seng Sep, the atmosphere shifted. The Bangkok I stepped into wasn't the glossy travel brochure version. It wasn't tuk-tuk touts or smoothie stands or temples selling incense to tourists. This was a working neighborhood, as corporate office blocks stood shoulder to shoulder with government buildings, high rise condo and apartment towers, and mid rise schools. BMWs and Benzes claimed the parking lots close to the doors. Must be the managers. Alongside every Asian car manufacturer model filling up the rest of the spaces. Secretaries in a hurry and staff with office badges bound into the building entrances. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. There was motion everywhere. People darting and dashing, tight on time, already mentally seated at their desks. It was real. No charm, no filtered glow. Just people going about the business of their lives. It had that unvarnished hum of routine, and maybe because of that, because there was no pretense, I loved it. I strolled the commuter hustling roadways until I came upon the temple grounds. Wat Utai Taram wasn't one of the showpiece temples pinned on tourist maps or circled in guidebooks. No vendors out front, no couples posing barefoot for their YouTube channel. Just a quiet stillness behind a modest entrance. It was beautiful, but in a way that didn't ask for attention. There was no pageantry here, just an open gate and lovely gold trim. A place built for practice, not performance. That suited me just fine. I wandered through the modest grounds, letting the sounds and stillness wash over me. The lazy sweep of a broom on stone tiles, the distant thud of a wooden mallet echoing from somewhere deeper in the compound where construction was continuing to evolve. The sky had gone a soft pale gray, the kind of color that made everything beneath it feel warmer, more rooted. It matched my mood. I came upon a young monk, old enough not to be a novice, but not yet old enough to shave, except for his head, of course. It was shiny and fresh, like he'd been newly unwrapped. He was full on Thai with a shy smile and exactly one English word in his arsenal. Hello. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, two humans with completely different operating systems. But the translator app on my phone came out of retirement and, through slow, careful exchanges, he learned what I was after. Time with a monk for a chat. Someone who might be open to a conversation about impermanence and the loss that was gnawing at me inside out. About the big stuff. He nodded once, then padded off barefoot at a purposeful pace. I followed, unsure if I was about to meet a teacher or handed a broom. He was sitting on a lone stone wall, looking upon the progress of temple building, robes neatly arranged, with the kind of stillness that looked practiced. There was an exchange between the young and old. He rose and motioned for me to follow. We entered the Wihan and sat down, lotus style, in an out-of-the-way corner. My hips, knees, and ankles all filed complaints about the first 3 minutes. We talked for hours. Not in a formal way. It was gentle, curious, the kind of talk that meandered but never strayed. As we spoke, I soon found a rhythm through my tale of woe. Pauses, glances, small hand gestures, a shared laugh at how clumsy language can be when trying to name things that are already slipping through your fingers. He didn't preach. He didn't correct. What he offered was mental cleansing. Empathy. Big, quiet, generous empathy. He listened like he already knew everything I hadn't said yet. And like any good psychiatrist, he let me come into my answers by myself, which always hit the hardest. When I left, I felt lighter, not because I'd offloaded anything, but because something in me had been seen. That's not something you can schedule on a travel itinerary. But I also stumbled upon an observation. Monks would make excellent poker players. That night, after a light bite of salad from the 7-Eleven and a leftover tandoori chicken quarter, the dinner that says, I can't be bothered to do anything else, I made my way the grueling 2 doors down the alley to the WYWS. I was looking for something easy, something familiar, something that didn't involve me spiraling through my memory banks at top speed. I pulled up a seat and started chatting with Ert and T, who were in good spirits. I don't know, I said, waving at the menu like it had personally wronged me. Call an audible. Surprise me with something delicious that will lift the spirits of the downtrodden. That may have been misunderstood, and I didn't bother to explain, as they looked at each other and shrugged. My mood wasn't sour, but that heartache, that low, persistent ache was hanging around, muttering reminders about Charlie's health. I'd known she had a serious issue with her heart. We had darkly joked about us imploding together while popping our pills in the AM and PM. Even after my long sit with the monk, I couldn't quite shake the feeling. Guilt flared now and again, like hot oil in a pan. I should have been there. I should have known. I should have carried her to the hospital or called the emergency line the second her tone shifted from bright to dim. Instead, I sat there on my second whimsical cocktail. Some unnamed sorcery tea had whipped up involving gin, calamansi, and what tasted suspiciously like flower petals and angel's tears. The bar wasn't crowded. It was too early for that. A couple sat at a table at one end, deep in the kind of conversation that either leads to marriage or a long solo walk home. A group of four in a booth at the other end laughed. And me? I was right in the middle along the empty bar. Switzerland. With a coaster. On the wall to the right of the bar, a silent video looped snow falling outside a mountain cabin up in the Rockies with Pikes Peak clearly painted in. I thought that was pretty funny, given I was in Bangkok, where winter is what they call the time of year when your shirt only sticks to your shoulders instead of your entire torso. I raised my glass toward the screen. To cabins. And poor timing, I muttered, and took a sip. I was scribbling in my journal, lost in some overwrought and overwritten reflection, when someone slid onto the stool next to me. I caught the soft cadence of Thai as she spoke, but whatever she ordered went straight past me, and straight into action from Ert, who moved with the kind of urgency usually reserved for small fires or high-maintenance regulars. I was still focused on my journal, trying to make my handwriting legible even to myself, when her drink arrived. It was spectacular. Smoking, glowing, layered like a pride parade flag, but prettier. One of those cocktails that looks less like a beverage and more like something a wizard uses to summon someone from the netherworld. I should ask for one of those next. I turned to see who warranted such a masterpiece. And there she was. A total knockout. Radiant, poised, sipping casually like she hadn't just short-circuited my brain. I stared a beat too long enough that she noticed, glanced at her drink, then at me. I gave her what I hoped was a casual smile, but looked more like a gaping awe. Smooth. All I could say was suai, which means beautiful. She smiled and said, Kop kun ka. And that's when I realized she'd thought I'd been complimenting her, which, fair, I had in a roundabout way. But the praise had really been aimed at the drink. She just happened to be sitting behind it like some perfectly lit mirage. Truth was, I didn't have any room left in my heart, or whatever part of me was supposed to house romantic feelings at that point. That space was fully occupied, and that lease wasn't up any time soon. Still, I didn't want to be rude. I smiled back and said, Yindi, Thai for you're welcome, because sometimes you just play along with the moment, even when you know in your heart it's not going anywhere. I am not a barfly. Despite whatever stories you've concocted about me, and I know you have, I've never been the guy perched at the end of the bar in Armani, nursing a martini and a pickup line. Well, not never. There was a period in my life, in my late 20s, that when I gave that whole scene an honest go. Unfortunately, I discovered through repeated, undeniable evidence that I was not the kind of guy women in bars were looking for. Turns out, chatting with a hot woman over a classic cocktail while quoting Byron doesn't exactly scream, "Take me home, sailor." My method, if you could call it that, involved opening with literary references, deep philosophical questions, or asking if they'd read the brothers Karamazov. Spoiler, they had not. Not one of them. And they weren't planning on it. Somewhere between rejection number 70 and a lot of drinks, I came to terms with a simple truth. I was neither an Adonis nor even remotely skilled in the art of barroom banter, and no amount of tragic poet energy was going to change that. Eventually, I made peace with it. If someone wasn't at least a little intrigued by metaphysics or couldn't spar with me over the finer points of Hamlet's moral paralysis, or embrace anything written by the great Hunter S. Thompson, I wasn't interested anyway. Her English was rudimentary, at best, and I'd been down that road before. The moment stretched, and like a cresting tsunami, memories of Charlie surged up into my chest, my spine, every nerve ending I hadn't numbed yet. Her voice, her laugh, that lasagna, all of it. I paused, took a breath, wrestled briefly with the multi-car pileup in my gut, then did what I've learned to do in moments like this. I shoved it into a mental drawer labeled "Not Now" and resolved to be decent, polite, present. I smiled and engaged, even if the bigger part of me was a million miles away, still living someone who wasn't sitting next to me. She made it easy. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and, with a raised eyebrow and the kind of look that said, "We both know the drill," opened our translator apps, the one everyone uses when pointing and pantomimes just won't cut it. I nodded, smiled, and lit up my own phone, app already running, because, of course it was. She smiled. I smiled. It was simple, light, and unexpectedly pleasant. No pressure, no awkward posturing, just two strangers sharing a moment of modern diplomacy through glowing screens and broken grammar. And for a few minutes it was easy to forget the pain and just be there. She was also staying at the Asoke Well in town at a convention for women's fashion and makeup artists, which, looking back, I probably should have guessed. Not just because she was beautiful, but because she was dressed like the event might be televised. Everything about her was intentional, her elegant outfit and her makeup subtle enough to seem effortless. It was clearly the work of someone who knew how to extract every ounce of effect from a few simple tricks. She asked what I was writing, so I launched into what was a painfully long-winded explanation of my journey, documenting my travels across Thailand. I'm sure I sounded like a cross between a travel blogger and a lost philosopher. Charming, right? Way to go, Larry. Now, how about some Descartes? She thought it was wonderful. Her dad was a writer, too, she said, proudly. I asked what kind of books he wrote, expecting something deep and meaningful. You know, historical tomes worthy of awards, or the newest expose, factually backed up about the psychology of conservative mindsets, or maybe a postmodern angst review. She placed her hand on my thigh, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Romance novels." Romance novels. I took a moment to let that sink in, because nothing says literary gravitas like a lifetime spent writing about star-crossed lovers, dramatic declarations, and more plot twists than a soap opera. It was the kind of bombshell you don't see coming when you're trying to impress someone with your own mediocre attempts at storytelling. We bought each other around. I threw caution to the wind and told T to double up whatever Mirabelle was drinking, because why not? The night stretched out as we talked. Monasteries, America, Thailand, food and cooking. Makeup and fashion, tea, cars, elephants, travel, museums, a little bit of everything, back and forth. It was effortless. It was easy. It was fun. I felt engaged and human. But underneath it all, I was slipping into an unwelcome place, a quiet zone of regret. Did I really want this? Sex without soulful connection? That's never been my thing. One night stands? Not my style. The few times that's happened in my life, I still carry the burden of those shallow, meaningless nights, like a bruise that won't fade. Loveless, base, transactional? I'd rather stay home and read one of her father's romance novels. At least those come with a plot. Normally, I would have welcomed this. She was smart, engaging, well versed in everything from art to automobiles, and incredibly hot to boot. By all rights, I should have felt something, but I didn't. Numbness, like a thick fog, settled in where feelings and the excitement of possibilities should be. And beneath it all, the sharp, definitive sense of betrayal. Because no matter how enticing and engaging the company, my heart wasn't there. It was back with Charlie, tangled up in love memories mixed with regrets I hadn't fully unpacked. She wasn't upset by my quiet rejection once I gave her the shorthand glimpse of the storm I was weathering inside. As I made my excuses to leave, she rose slowly and with a gentleness that caught me off guard, pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. Her eyes held a quiet kindness, a tenderness that words couldn't capture. Then carefully she typed into her app, "She was a very lucky woman to have found you. I'm sorry you lost her." That simple message landed between us like a fragile thread, delicate, sincere, and profoundly human. Back upstairs in my apartment, curled up in bed alone, tears streaming uncontrollably down my cheeks. I couldn't stop. I found myself apologizing to Charlie, not just for the fleeting, shallow thought of hooking up with someone else, but for the desperate, aching need to fill the connection that she had built with me. I went from quiet tears to full on, body racking sobs that saw no end. The loss of my friend, my lover, crashed over me like a building collapsing, relentless and merciless, crushing my heart and soul beneath its weight. But Charlie was more than just a friend or lover. She was the woman who had teased me, challenged me, tested me, pushed me to my limits in ways no one else ever had. And because I had passed every exam, she had rewarded me with her golden stars, adoration, admiration, and a love so rare and profound that it defies simple description. It was still dark as I drifted slowly up from the edges of dreamland, my body heavy and still tangled in sleep, when I actually felt her, Charlie, holding me. Not just in memory, but like a warm, breath-soaked presence pressing close, her arms around me in a way that was both tender and impossibly real. Then came her whisper, soft and clear, a voice threading through the quiet darkness. "Thank you for honoring us. She wanted to come to your bed, but all the while your heart never left me. You are honorable and loyal, and I love you so deeply. I'll always be here, beside you, inside you, with you." Her words hung in the air, a fragile promise wrapped in love and longing. It was both comfort and hollow ache, a reminder that some bonds outlast time, space, and even absence. I lay there, feeling the weight of her presence, caught somewhere between the tangible and the ghostly, between what was lost and what remained. It was visceral. It was physical. I woke fully from that dreamscape, sweating, heart pounding, expecting to turn and find her ghostly visage smiling softly at me with those eyes that radiated love. But no, just the quiet dark and the stubborn ache of absence. It was my mind, my soul playing a bittersweet game, luring me back into Charlie's welcoming arms, just to feel that beautiful togetherness once again. I drifted back into sleep knowing I'd made the right call, that honoring what I'd had was more important than chasing what might be. It took a long time to fully awaken. I was dragging, heavy, not from alcohol, but from the emotional gravity of the night. The entire encounter looped in my mind, frame by frame. I caught myself foolishly scanning the apartment for signs. Tiny, impossible clues that Charlie had somehow crossed the veil and come to me in the night. Was the remote angled differently than I'd left it? Wasn't that water bottle empty when I crashed? I could have sworn I'd tossed my clothes in the corner, but now they were neatly folded and placed atop the laundry bag. Something I never do, but she always did. Stupid, I know. Desperate, definitely. But somehow there was a faint scent in the air. Charlie's scent. Familiar, warm, yet fleeting. Something that didn't belong to memory but was fresh and alive. A lingering bouquet of her. Or maybe just my mind playing tricks, layering the longing with illusion. Still, I held on to that trace of her, like a drowning man lunging for driftwood. I stepped into the shower and let the warmth wash over me. I closed my eyes, letting it become a meditation on grief, on grace, on the ache of love that refuses to leave. Yet I'll wrestle with myself every day just to keep the ache alive, because the pain meant she was still there, and I would rather carry that weight, raw and unrelenting, than let her fade into memory. Letting go would mean losing her twice, and I couldn't bear that. Not ever. Back in the land of the living where the water smells like diesel, I hopped the Seine Sep Canal ferry, only a block and a bridge away from the apartment. The boat, a very fast yet rickety tarp-covered barge that seemed to defy both physics and modern safety standards, roared northward like it had somewhere better to be. I stayed upright, which on that thing is a minor miracle, and rode it 4 stops to Tonglor Pier. As I stepped off the boat, I whispered to Charlie, "All right, love, let's go see what's out there." It was both reflex and ritual now, a quiet nod to the ghost in my machine. No tears this time, just a gentle pang tucked away in my heart. I had no plan. I just wanted to walk. I needed to walk, to discover. All the way up Tong Lo Road, Sukhumvit Road 55 for those keeping score, then right along Sukhumvit proper, then another right, taking me back down to the Asoke residence. The goal? Rack up some kilometers, forage for breakfast and lunch like a streetwise vagabond, and explore what's often touted as Bangkok's trendiest neighborhood. I'd heard Tonglo was where Thai celebrities and Novu rich sent their designer dogs for grooming and bought 300 baht matcha lattes that looked like science experiments. I was in, at least from a cultural observation perspective. Disembarking the Klong boat with the skill of someone who's learned all the tricks, to the left of the dock was a cavernous warehouse, open to the street like a gaping mouth. Inside, it was teeming with what could only be described as a junk market. This was not a tourist trap selling elephant pants and fridge magnets. This was the real deal, purely local, unapologetically rough around the edges, and I knew the moment I stepped inside that I had crossed some invisible threshold into unfamiliar territory. The looks I got said it all. "You're not from around here, are you, boy?" Piles of used clothing were stacked in mounds. Shirts, trousers, bras, underwear, mismatched socks, most of it in tangled heaps like fabric had given up on being folded in this lifetime. The prices were so low they might have been suggestions. One of the piles had a price sign that said, in Thai, "You buy not the item, but by weight." I used the translator to figure that out. I'd never seen garments sold by weight before. Off to one side was a table of old electronics, enormous first gen VCRs, dusty radios with dials, tangled power cords, ancient irons that probably had more rust inside than a sunken ship, and, be still my nostalgic heart, an original Sony Walkman, the kind I had once clutched as a teenager like sacred treasure on long trips. I picked it up briefly, held it like a relic, and gently set it down again. There was no way that thing still worked, but it almost hurt to let it go. Around another corner were sporting goods, if you could call them that. Battered soccer and flat basketballs, splintered cricket bats held together with duct tape, some kind of goalie assemblage, yoga mats that had clearly seen some things none of us would like to think about. This wasn't a market so much as a dingy garage sale where all the garages had flooded and no one bothered to sort the mess. And the smell? Dear God, the smell! It was the kind of sour, rotten trash can, oily funk that clung to your clothes and followed you out like a stray dog. In the back were two road-weary food carts, one with a pot of something burbling like that looked like motor oil and smelled vile. That's the only word that truly fits. I usually orbit streetcars like a meteor that's been sucked in by gravitational pull, but not this time. Whatever they were cooking back there had found a new, very dark corner of the olfactory wheel, one I hope never to revisit. Still, I lingered, because this was life unfiltered. No camera ready tourist angles or artful displays. Just locals going about their day, bartering over broken toasters and weathered jeans. It was raw and unfiltered, and that alone made it beautiful, just not edible. Wandering farther up the road, and thankfully out of the range of the chemical warfare being cooked up in that warehouse of forgotten lives, I felt the fog begin to lift. Whatever that stench had been, rancid duck fat mixed with old socks and suicidal dreams? It was now behind me, fading like a bad memory you don't want to talk about, but will absolutely bring up at dinner for the gross out factor. I dodged a few tuk-tuks and a man carrying what I hoped was a mannequin's leg, and into a side street looking for quiet. I ducked down the romantically named Tong Lo 25 Alley. They have a thing for numbered streets in Thailand. It was there I found salvation in the form of caffeine and puffy laminated dough. Pacamara Coffee Roaster. Minimalist black and white signage. Industrial concrete and tinted big pane glass with aircon cold enough to qualify as a wine cellar. So ultra chic inside, the place practically screamed, "We only serve people with ironic tattoos, pork pie hats, and limited edition sneakers." And I was fine with that, though I had none of those to offer the hipster gods. The espresso was so dense and rich, it could have paid rent on a Tokyo penthouse. Perfectly extracted. No bitterness, just that tight, tiger-striped crema that clung to the lip like a tattoo of its own. If I hadn't wiped it off, it'd still be there. The croissant? Holy moly! It was absurdly light, with layers so thin you could read print through them. It exploded on first bite like crystal, then gave way to a floating interior that somehow defied gravity and science. I sat there, caffeinated and quietly euphoric, reading the morning news and wondering if anyone had ever described a pastry as explosive without being ridiculed. I guess I'll find out. The air was already thick with humidity, but that didn't stop the Tonglo locals from looking sharp. A woman in full business attire strode past me like the heat was a mild inconvenience. I, on the other hand, was already sticking to myself in three places and hadn't even gotten back to the main road. Tonglo is a curious beast. Equal parts modern Hong Kong old school Bangkok and Beverly Hills on a sugar high. In one block, I passed a sleek fronted cafe called Perception. What does it serve? Lattes named Existential Dread? A street vendor grilling skewers of foie gras, and a car dealership where the cheapest vehicle on display was a Rolls Royce Phantom. Still, it was oddly charming. Locals bustled around. They were on a secret schedule I wasn't privy to. Expats in linen pants pretending not to care how they looked while casually angling for the best TikTok light. I was somewhere in the middle, sun-drenched, caffeinated, and trying not to look like I was narrating the whole thing in my head, which I was. And you know what? It felt good. Not profound or life-altering, but good in that subtle, maybe I'll be okay after all kind of way. The grief hadn't gone away, but it had loosened its grip around my soul just enough to let in a little curiosity. And the promise of something delicious just around the corner didn't hurt either. It was lunchtime, and I was on the hunt. Back on the main drag, I wandered aimlessly. It was the kind of wandering where you're not really looking for anything, but you'll know it when you see it. The famed nightlife of Tong Lo was nowhere in sight. Daylight had a way of turning cocktail dens into shuttered mysteries and trendy restaurants into quiet storefronts with frosted windows and self-important fonts. But even in repose, you could tell why this neighborhood had a reputation. It was tidy and unnaturally new. Hipster minimalism met Bangkok gloss. Coffee shops with one-syllable names. Avant-garde galleries where paintings don't have price tags. And salons so high-end you needed a stylist just to get an appointment with another stylist. And then I saw it. Lunch. A small cluster of two-story Japanese-themed buildings sat off to my right, like someone had airlifted a corner of Kyoto and plopped it into Bangkok. I looked up. On the second floor was a modest sign in clean white font. Tsuru Homemade Udon. Below it a Lamborghini, a Lancia, and something else expensive and aerodynamic were parked outside a luxury auto detailer. Japanese noodles above? Supercars below? I mean, who doesn't want to slurp thick, hand-cut udon while spying on someone toothbrush clean the wheels of a hypercar? I went upstairs and stepped inside. The place was hushed despite nearly every table being full. Each table was low to the ground with clean lines and calm aesthetics, the kind of dining arrangement that whispered discipline and posture and a slipped disc. But mercifully, someone had done us all a solid. The area beneath each table had been hollowed out, so while it looked like you were seated demurely on a tatami mat, serene and culturally enlightened, in reality you were just sitting at the little kid's table with a leg well, a clever illusion called Horgigotatsu. Zen on top, orthopedic underneath. The menu didn't impress with design. It wasn't one of those embossed artisanal triple-fold affairs printed on hand-pressed rice paper and ink made from the chef's tears. No, this stunner was all content. Dish after dish that made me sit up straighter and consider what I'd been doing with my life until now. The tenmusu caught my eye first. A sushi hand grenade. A plump rice boat wrapped in nori, topped with tempura shrimp so fresh it died with honor. I hadn't seen that since San Francisco at Hamano in Noe Valley. In days long past, and I wasn't about to pass up the chance to revisit that edible nostalgia. Edamame was a no-brainer, like peanuts at a dive bar, but for people who know what dashi is. Salty, firm, addictive. I could eat my weight in them and still consider it a palate cleanser. Then came the main event. Hiyashi Ikura. Cold, handmade udon noodles coiled like silk ribbon beneath a riot of color and texture, with translucent salmon roe that popped like little ocean fireworks, crispy tempura corn, dried shrimp, slivered vegetables, a confetti of umami-packed goodies. Each bite was a cold plunge into complexity, bright and briny, fat and clean, all at once. I was briefly tempted by another dish called bukkake oroshi. A moment of juvenile, immature laughter flickered by, but I decided not to press my luck, or the waitress's patience. Just what was in that sauce again? Lunch was phenomenal, if you were in the neighborhood. Turning right onto Sukhumvit Road, I crossed to the far side. Yes, Mom, I used the sidewalk and looked both ways. I even waited for the little green man to wave me on. I could hear her voice in my head. Do you want to get flattened by a scooter going 60 while the driver eats soup? No, Mother, I do not. I had discovered a used bookstore along that stretch, and wouldn't you know, it was just a few blocks down. There it was, Dasa Book Cafe, standing proud like a literary oasis between a Doc Martin store and a gallery. The place looked like it had survived coups, recessions, and several generations of backpackers pretending to understand Proust. My kind of shop. With only a couple of nights left at the Asoke, tomorrow was earmarked for horizontal ambitions, lounging by the pool, catching up on writing, and reacquainting myself with the fine art of doing absolutely nothing. I left most of my books behind on Ko Chang, not because I didn't like them, but because hauling around 10 pounds of bound paper and ink in 100-degree heat and 200% humidity makes you question your commitment to plot development. Besides, I'd read them already. They'd found a good home alongside the guest stash at the K-Bay Grand View, an informal lending library of John Le Carre and Daniel Steele novelettes, alongside 20 copies of Eat, Pray, Love, and even more of 50 Shades of whatever. Spines cracked and swollen like the feet of every tourist who's underestimated Thai walking distances. It was time to reload. Preferably something with a pulse, maybe a road trip novel. Sorry, Jack, already read On the Road a dozen times. Or some coming of age story with a narrator who wasn't trying too hard to sound deep. A book with mileage and hopefully a font larger than 8 point. It wasn't the Lost Bookshop, my favorite multi-storied warren up in Chiang Mai, but Dasa was a solid runner-up. A proper used bookstore. The owner, an amenable expat with a tan the color of aged mahogany, ran the place with his sharp-eyed Thai wife. You could tell they'd been at it for decades. There was a rhythm to their presence, like bartenders who'd heard every story more than twice. I gave him some loose parameters. No trash novels, no books with embossed gold titles or cover endorsements from People magazine. He gave me a withering look over the tops of his glasses, the kind that said, "What sort of establishment do you think I'm running here, bub?" Fair enough. To get back in his good graces, I named a few literary spirit animals: Edward Abbey, Kessie, Atwood, Thompson, Wolfe, Buford, Sedaris, and tossed in a few red herrings just to keep him guessing. That did the trick. He softened, nodded once, disappeared into the stacks, and returned with a few paperbacks by authors I'd never heard of. But he had the glint of a man who reads, which is different from a man who merely sells books. I grabbed a few and made a mental note to swing back once I moved back up the road. My last week in Thailand would be spent inside the chaos of central Sukhumvit, and I had a feeling I'd want something to read that didn't involve enlightenment or instructions on how to cleanse my chakras with activated charcoal and a rub down with fermented bean paste. Nothing else happened. No, really. The walk back to the Asoke was uneventful, quiet in a manner that felt like kindness. The sun was slipping lower, behind the towers of glass and steel, softening the edges of the city's energy into a gentle hum. At the end of the alley, I stopped at the fruit cart and loaded up on skewered melons and pineapple. Mangosteens caught my eye, that nirvana fruit that once held me in rapture. Charlie and my relationship blossomed over that delicacy, and we shared mangosteens every day from the moment we met. It was our cornerstone. I gazed upon them, remembering laughter over their perfumed sweetness. Those moments, simple and perfect, as if mangosteen was created just for us. But today, they'd lost their sparkle. They weren't the same. Or they were, but I certainly as hell wasn't. Like so much else in life, the fruit was still there, but the magic wasn't. Sometimes, the things that once lit you up become reminders of what you can't have. I grabbed a bag of cow fat and some awesome smelling pad krapao as well. Street cart comfort food that required no fuss, no effort beyond opening the bag. Man, they wrapped those red rubber bands tightly around the tops. Shoveling a spoon in and have at it. No grand gestures, just easy and delicious sustenance. The next day unfolded slow and easy. Late morning found me sprawled poolside at the Asoke residence, the sun pouring down in a generous wave, turning the water a shimmering, hypnotic, bright blue. The air was thick with the buzz of city life from down the alley, where cars and scooters were doing their thing, while the hum of conversation from nearby balconies blended into a gentle soundtrack for my reverie. In one hand, a cold beer. Crisp, light, the kind that slides down easy and reminds you why summer days exist. In the other, a used copy of The Lincoln Highway by Amar Towles. Its pages dog-eared, rife with stories of brothers whose roads stretched out before them. The prose was rich and warm, painting Midwestern landscapes, hobo trains, vile adventures, and sibling bonds with a charming tenderness that hit deep. It's an outstanding bit of writing should you be looking for something new. I let the words wash over me, as the sunshine did, slow and steady, filling up the empty spaces left behind by restless thoughts. My shattered dreams were still there, but faded, replaced by the gentle rhythm of the day, the clink of ice in glasses, the laughter of others around the pool, and the gleeful splash of kids frolicking and diving in the water. For a while, it was just my book, and a blue sky, and a lonely normalcy. The fine young lads manning the front desk at Asoke had that glint in their eyes, equal parts insider knowledge and impish mischief when they told me that Sri Kaharinwi Rot University, just up the road, held a weekly night market and food fair. "It's really good," one of them said, with the kind of hushed emphasis usually reserved for insider trading deals. This was the same guy who'd recommended Bombay Masala, and that young man had proven taste. So I thought, sure, if it's terrible, I'll pivot to the Yakitori shack just down the road and gnaw on some grilled chicken parts. The market took over the university's big open quad, and it was absolutely hopping. Wall-to-wall students, music thumping from both ends, smells curling through the air like siren songs, and not another farang in sight. My hopes perked up like a street dog sporting a dropped satay skewer. But I was worried. That market had all the trademarks of mediocrity. Fancy modern carts and upscale stalls, custom neon signs, cartoon mascots bouncing around like they were promoting a new energy drink, influencers flitting about with their gimbals and filters. But beneath the razzle-dazzle, it was basically a modern remix of something ancient and wonderful: community, craziness, and food. I immediately fell for the mushroom guy. He'd set up a long Sri Sharon grill with row after row of hulking porcini mushrooms, their gills glistening, lined up like fungi fashion runway over glowing Binchotan coals. He was cooking them to perfection, then brushing them with a bright yuzu juice sauce. They were incredible. Then came the Wagyu skewers, rich and buttery and gone too fast. A woman was frying up chicken that snapped when you bit it, not from crunch, but from sheer self-respect. Someone was turning out golden oyster French omelets. Yes, I had one. While another cart flipped thin roti filled with banana and drizzled condensed milk like Pollock was in the back. And just when I thought I might escape with some dignity, a woman reeled me in with strawberry, blueberry, and durian custard tarts, each the size of a poker chip and twice as addictive. And yes, I ate all of it. But wait, there's more. Because there's always more at Thai street markets. A lot more. Local bands jammed at either end of the quad, the kind of music you don't know but instantly get nostalgic for. It looked like the entire student body and half their professors had turned out for the shindig. So, yeah, another feather in that stylish young concierge's cap. The man was 2 for 2. I might have to ask him for Thailand investment tips next. I didn't feel like venturing too far afield, so I made a tactical retreat to WYWS, and honestly, how has no one asked me what the hell that stands for yet? WYWS. It sounds like a dental school or a boy band. But no, it's short for Where You Wander Station. I didn't name it. I just drink there. With that out of the way, I asked for a martini. No lecture needed, and no Himalayan bitters aged in yak hide barrel. Just a martini. He obliged. Bless him. I called it an early night, slipped back to the apartment, caught up with Charlie over my personal hotline to heaven, watched something on Amazon Prime that I forgot 10 minutes after it ended, and called it a day. A good one. Full belly, half full heart, and just buzzed enough to sleep like a man with nothing left in that day's tank. It was my last day at the Asoke residence, and as I packed up early that morning, I found myself surprisingly sentimental. The place had been good to me. Quietly, steadily good. Not in any flashy Instagram me kind of way, but in the ways that mattered. Cathartic, even. It had let me heal, if even a little. Stretch out, go inward, and wander outward. Was the Asoke a 5-star hotel? No, it was better. Mostly, locals stayed there. The staff called me by name. I saw the same cat every morning curled up under the frangipani bush. It felt lived in, honest, real. That meant something. I dropped off my laundry the day before at the little mom and pop place down the block and picked it up early. It smelled downy fresh, still warm, pressed and bundled up ready to go. With everything zipped and packed, there was nothing left to do but go for a walk. I made my way across the footbridge, the same one that ran above the Klong Sangsep Canal where ferries ply the canal like coked-up sea serpents, and made up for the Phetchaburi BTS. One stop to Sukhumvit. I could have walked it, but I was feeling the kind of slow burn lazy that comes from knowing it's your last day and you've earned it. The best kind. I was on one of my wandering jags. No destination in mind, just a vague craving for movement and maybe a new pair of walking shorts. Not just any shorts. Something breathable, pocketed, and capable of surviving Thai humidity without welding itself to my inner thigh by midday. You know, high standards. I got off the BTS and wandered into Terminal 21 Asak. Yet another mega mall bad trip variety travesty of greed, where air conditioning and artificial light try to blind you into thinking you were having fun. Each of these shopping behemoths has its own Frankenstein personality stitched together from influencer wish lists and design school dropouts. T21? T21 was trying so hard to be cool, it was painful. Like Grandpa at Coachella in a crop top with his mullet sticking out from an ironic bucket hat. Just no. Every floor is themed like a different city. Rome, Tokyo, London, Istanbul, and fails miserably at the concept. It's like a passport to madness. Still, I didn't care. I was roaming, my mood set to low expectations. I knew full well I wasn't going to find the kind of shorts I wanted. Not unless I wanted to pay luxury resort prices for the privilege of looking like a cast-off from the bad rom-com third time around spin-off. But that's the penalty for wandering into a mall where make-believe glitz and mall glamour go to die under mood-controlling computerized LED lighting. I wandered on, shorts still theoretical, dignity intact, for now. After a grueling 20 minutes, yes, a whole 20, I couldn't take it anymore. I tapped out. Enough of the shops, which all seemed like cut, copy, paste versions of each other. Enough of the food courts trying hard to dish up authentic and failing spectacularly. I felt horrible for the shop clerks all sporting the same 1,000-yard stares, endlessly refolding the same logo shirts or obsessively rearranging artisanal soap pyramids, hoping someone, anyone, would wander in and ask them anything. I don't even think they wanted you to buy something. No, commerce was secondary. They just wanted to be seen, to feel alive, to break the slow, fluorescent chokehold of retail purgatory. I almost walked into a shop out of pure pity, but I knew if I made eye contact, I'd never escape. I'd be guilt-sold into a cologne I'd never wear or a linen shirt that would unravel in the wash. So I bolted. Terminal 21. Come for the aircon, stay for... Nope. Can't think of a single reason. I made my escape like a man fleeing a collapsing mine shaft, lightheaded, slightly ashamed, and covered in the psychic rot of overstimulation. Back out into the street, I took a deep, fresh breath of Bangkok smog and admired the not-so-fresh air. I wandered up toward the Nana district, that swirling human soup of confusion and consumption, where the most compacted, impacted throng of wide-eyed tourists fanned out across the zone like spilled marbles, each one slowly rolling toward their next sugar and fish sauce intersect. I had purposely been avoiding checking the area out simply because of all the tourist recommendations that said it was crazy fun, which means no, it isn't. None of them knew what they wanted, which oddly made sense. Because at the surface level of tourism, Bangkok doesn't really ask you to know. It just asks you to keep moving along. If you know where and how and when to get the good stuff. But Nana? No. And when in doubt, eat. That's what most of them were doing anyway. Scarfing down fried things, roasted things, braised things, sweet things, skewers of mystery meats, plate after plate of mediocre tourist pad thai, and something that might have been alive at one point, or it might have been a shoelace. I couldn't tell, even up close, but no one seemed bothered. And when the hordes aren't eating, they're drinking. A lot. From tiki bars to swanky whiskey dens, everyone is drinking. Except the bar girls. Their drinks are colored water, and they'll cost you $20 a pop. That and a little love you long time? That's Nana. I strolled through it all, part spectator, part participant in the flow, letting the current pull me forward, along sidewalks, stone-laid courtyards, the Nana Plaza blazing away with neon-glazed stores, stalls, and carts, past girly and ladyboy bars. I kept moving. I looped back toward the ASOC, where the city feels less like a sales pitch and more like a well-lived-in apartment where younger generations still party every night. Tomorrow, I'd move into the Rembrandt Hotel for my last 8 days in Thailand. A final descent with a high thread count. The place had character, which is just a polite way of saying the carpets had stories and the wallpaper was faded. But if it meant avoiding the gleaming towers packed with tourists who travel thousands of miles to experience a Western chain hotel identical to the one back home, then yes, Rembrandt me up. I don't need top-flight luxury. I needed a soft bed, access to great food options, a pool, and a place to quietly accept that my adventure was winding down. That's not to say the Rembrandt didn't still carry more than a few glimmers of its former glory. Back in its heyday, it was one of the best hotels in the district. White tablecloth fancy, elbows off the bar classy. But time marches on for all and everything, And the one thing I've learned along the way is that the Thai love to build. Constantly. Relentlessly. Maintenance, though? Not as sexy, so that's not a part of the business plan. But it was a killer deal on a travel site. Location and age charm? Check. Large suites and bathrooms that didn't feel like a penalty box? Absolutely. Two pools and a deck bar to squint out at the skyline and pretend I understood anything about endings? Sold. I wasn't chasing glamour. I just needed a soft place to land while the trip folded itself onto pages and into memory. I swung into the vast marble lobby and introduced myself, explained that I'd been staying down a sock Montry by the Seine Sep Canal, but would be checking in tomorrow. And any chance of an early check-in possible? Yes! Once they found my reservation, they asked if I needed help with bags or a taxi. But by now, I knew how the city worked. I smiled, thanked them, and with the practiced ease of someone who'd earned a few Thai stripes, said, I got it. Kop kon krab. See you in the morning. Staying in a big suite on the 29th floor, looking out over the vertical sprawl of Bangkok and down onto the high-rise pool deck and rooftop gardens felt like the proper way to wind things down. The bed wasn't a king, it was a California king. An entire zip code of mattress. I unpacked for the last time in Thailand, taking my time to settle in. Clothes in drawers, closet-worthy gear onto hangers, toiletries in the bathroom. What was left of them. I changed into shorts, grabbed a book, journal, and pens, and made my way to the 11th floor pool deck to catch a little sun. Maybe sneak in a morning nap on a chaise and order something easy poolside. I grabbed a few towels from the deck rack and claimed the last available chaise lounge. By then, the early risers had already come down to stake their claims. Towels, newspapers, or a paperback left like territorial flags. One nice thing about traveling solo, there's usually that one odd man out spot left. I read for a while, sipping what could technically be described as coffee, if we're going purely by color. I'd fix that situation later. The upside? So little caffeine that after a few sips and a few pages of a book that wasn't exactly setting my world on fire, I started to drift. I won't name names. The author had clearly put effort into crafting her tale, but it wasn't enough. I let myself slide into dreamland beneath the mid-morning Bangkok sun. I was woken by boisterous voices with New Zealand lilts coming my way. As I approached and saw that I was napping, the volume dropped like a DJ fading out the dance floor. I slowly surfaced, eyes still closed behind jet black shades, and gave them a cursory nod as they settled in. I let myself drift back out onto my private ocean of sleep. I don't know how long I was under. I'd slipped deep into a personal REM-scape. Vivid IMAX level dreams featured a rotating cast of my ex, Charlie, my daughter, an old friend. A couple of monks dancing in and out of the sequences. All of them needed something, wanted something, urging something with the kind of intensity that makes dream logic feel like courtroom drama. And then jostling, a voice cut through the ether. Mate, you're going to lobster bake like that. I jerked awake, totally disoriented, skin hovering just a few degrees shy of ignition point. Thanking the gentleman profusely, I decided a plunge would be a great way to get the blood flowing. That was a huge fucking mistake. I'd foolishly skipped the part where one checks the pool temp before diving in. That there wasn't ice floating on the surface was a miracle that should go into some book for posterity. Oh, wait. I've got that covered. Shrinkage? No. Shrinkage implies a measurable event. This was implosion. Internal organs retreated. Parts of me I valued wondered if they were welcome anymore. Ice cream headache? That would have been merciful. This was full-body vascular betrayal. By the time I surfaced, gasping like someone who had just survived a plane crash into the Arctic, my brain was calmly narrating, so this is what cardiac arrest feels like. My dive momentum had carried me through to shallow end steps, which was the only reason I didn't sink and call it a life well lived. And any ideas of a flip turn and a heroic lap to the other side? Laughable. No thank you. That idea died on contact. I tried to play it cool as I made my way along the curve of the kidney shaped pool, but I was shaking and chattering like an entire grove of aspen trees in a stiff autumn breeze. Graceful exit? Not even close. The Kiwi chap came over, bearing a towel like it was a holy grail. Bit brisk in there, mate. He grinned, as if he hadn't just witnessed a grown man go into a full aquatic convulsion. Understatement of the century from anywhere or anytime. I wrapped the towel around me like a trauma blanket. Luckily, it had been roasting in the sun and felt like it had just come out of a dryer set to lava. I lay back down and let the blazing sun finish thawing me out. It felt incredible. I was, now, without question, wide awake. At this point, I could keep boring you with more. More tales, more street food, more wrong turns on public transportation and alley discoveries. But why? We've already walked these soys together. You've read about the markets, the temples, the steaming bowls of soup and endless noodle slurps. You know the rhythm of it by now. The rest? You should go to get lost in Thailand and find it yourself. So here's the short version of my final week. I wandered the enormous Chatuchak Park and lost myself in the labyrinth of the gigantic weekend market. I then spent a few tranquil hours in Benchakatiti Forest Park, tucked like a vast secret right in the city's concrete chest. I saw more monitor lizards slithering through the shallows, but I didn't flinch. Charlie wasn't beside me anymore. If they wanted a piece of me, they could have it. There were late nights, strong coffee, foot massages under flickering bulbs, the smell of grilled pork in alleys that looked dangerous until they smiled back. You know, the Bangkok beat by now. But here's a deeper truth. The soul of Bangkok is hustle. Not the Western idea of hustle, the grind for status, win at any cost treadmill. No, Bangkok's hustle is woven into the saffron robes of monks at dawn, walking barefoot for alms. It's in the vendor who wakes at 4 a.m. to prep jock for the early bird workers before traffic snarls the streets. It's in the elderly woman outside Hua Lamphong station selling lottery tickets with a politeness so graceful it feels like a benediction. I've never believed in heaven, hell, or an afterlife, but Dorje Rinpoche did. So did every Thai monk and lay practitioner I sat with on cushions, at a battered table with plastic stools, on a sidewalk curb, or upon temple steps. For them, reincarnation wasn't a question. It was the architecture of reality. And after sitting with it through many moments of contemplation, I started to wonder, what if I'd been too quick to dismiss reincarnation? Too proud to admit that there are things I don't understand that deserve a second or third look. After all, weren't Copernicus and Newton considered madmen in their time? Einstein was told to stick to patents. And Feynman? He introduced a whole new paradigm to reality, which it seems is always up for revision. And then there was Namdak, all those decades ago, as we stood in that Capitola home, hugging goodbye. He whispered something that stayed with me like a string tied around my finger. I'll always be your friend, for all times, in every world, in all forms and rebirths. We don't end here. I don't know if he's right, but I want him to be. I want to believe that the soul, the essence of who we are, gets another shot. That love, once kindled, doesn't vanish with the body. I want to believe in my heart that somewhere, in some form, Charlie is waiting. And if that's true, if these mysteries hold weight, I'd accept every ounce of sorrow for one more crossing. Thailand, if not life itself, teaches you that everything cycles. People, markets, moods, even the monsoons. There's a Thai saying goes, Mai pen rai. Never mind, let it go. Everything flows on. Suffering, joy, love, life, that's impermanence. And yes, the city, as is life, is a hustle, but it's not a cynical one. It's about scraping together enough. Enough for a meal, a phone top up, a school uniform for your son. It's the kind of hustle that keeps a society running not on greed, but on grit and grace. Because beneath it all, we all want the same things: a safe place to sleep, a meal we don't have to beg for, a partner who holds us even after the fire of passion turns to the soft embers of loyalty, a child who eats without fear, a body that doesn't flinch at bombs, bullets, or bureaucrats. It doesn't matter if your soil is Thai or Texan, Irish or Indian. What matters is how you move through the world, how you treat the stranger at a stall, your lover in the kitchen, or your own trembling self at 3 in the morning. Maybe leaving home for that quiet monastery in the misty northern mountains of Thailand was selfish, but I needed to fall apart for a while. I needed to test myself, to rebuild myself, to find out if I was right about anything or if I was clinging to beliefs that were keeping me from being truly alive. And what I've come to believe, through monks, mangoes, and moments of connection, is that we keep turning, that the universe isn't asking us for perfection, it's asking for participation, for presence. Every day there are storms and gifts, pain and balm. You don't get to choose the ratio, but you do get to show up. So, pack a bag, get sick, heal, fall in love, lose yourself, eat something that smells like gasoline and tastes like heaven, sit on a bus for hours beside a stranger who offers you dried squid snacks with a grin, smile at the faces that scare you, and watch how they smile back. Do you hear what they're saying? Hey, you are just like me.